All right, here we are again. Same shit, different day. Tuesday, the 27th, 2 days ago, El Cajon Police Department down in the San Diego area ended up ending in an officer-involved shooting. They were called to the scene because a man was acting erratically. I don't know the full text of the call. It says he wasn't acting normal. He was running around doing all kinds of crazy stuff. I know that the sister called, or the man's sister called. I don't know if they'd received any other calls. I'm not fully versed in this incident. However, I'm going to address some of the bullshit that the media is pushing. I'll show you some headlines here in a minute and talk about why they're outright lies or extremely biased, one or the other. So let's talk about the incident real quick. This is what I know. Cops get called because the guy's acting erratically. They get there, they contact him. He's acting erratically. He has his hands in his pockets, and he won't show them his hands. He won't comply with orders. And then, all of a sudden, while they're sitting there talking to him, and they're trying to get him to pull his hands out, he comes up and he goes like this, with something in his hands, and points it at the cops. Is that a gun? No, it's not. It's a baton. What was he holding? He was holding a vape. Okay, tell me that's any different than me standing here talking to you, and all of a sudden I come up like this. Is there a significant difference in the movement there? There's not. The media is making a big deal about the, quote, shooting stance that this guy took. It was a perfect isosceles stance. You can see it in the photos. They're making a giant deal about the cops shoot this unarmed black guy for no reason because he's black or because he was mentally ill. It doesn't matter if he's mentally ill. It doesn't matter what his skin color was. The guy came up and took a shooting stance with something in his hand that was round, cylindrical, and long. It looked like a gun. The officers fired. I'm tired of this media, the media and Black Lives Matter and all these people out there pushing this bullshit narrative that the cops are just out there killing people for no reason. This is what we call suicide by cop. This guy, I'll go into it more in a minute here. So let's go ahead and look at some of these headlines, and then I'll start talking about some of the issues that are there. All right, so let's talk about some of these headlines. Here's USA Today. This is a supposedly legitimate source of news. This isn't Vox or HuffPo or the Free Thought Project or any of those other far, far left websites, although it can be argued that the mainstream media is far left. But okay, so here's USA Today's headline. A shooting stance, ? Black man shot by San Diego area police dies. Question mark in quotes. It's clearly a shooting stance. Anybody that knows anything about shooting knows it's a shooting stance. I'll talk about that more and show you some pictures for those of you who don't know anything about shooting. So, moving on. And here we have AP News, and it's the big story. California officer guns down man in, quote, shooting stance. Again, misleading. They're insinuating that the cops are lying about this being a shooting stance. Again, I will show shooting stances here in a moment. And here is CNN. Police, man killed by officer, pointed vaping device, not gun. Of course, this is 2020 hindsight information that they're basing their story on. So let's look at the next one here. We got, here's the USA Today follow-up article. El Cajon police shoot unarmed black man pointed a vape before fatal shooting. Again, 2020 hindsight information. And here we have the Free Thought Project. The Free Thought Project is essentially Cop Block Light. It's probably no coincidence that the three initials FTP also stand for F the police. But let's take a look at their headline. Cop with history of intimidation and stalking kills innocent, unarmed, mentally ill man on video. Gee, that's not incendiary at all. Speaking of Vox, here we have Vox's headline, which oddly enough is probably one of the most non-incendiary headlines of the ones that I've noticed here. San Diego area police shoot and kill Alfred Olango, who was reportedly unarmed and mentally ill. The subtitle there, a woman claiming to be his sister says police called for help. When police arrived, they killed him. It's kind of shortening up the whole thing and putting it all in a somewhat misleading sentence, but we'll let it slide. It's Vox after all. And here we have the LA Times.
El Cajon shooting a new flashpoint in how police deal with African Americans and the mentally ill. Because this shooting obviously was based on the fact that he was mentally ill and he was black. So, again, misleading, and I'll get to address both of those points here in a second. And the last of the headlines here. We got Reuters. And California shooting shows police ill-equipped to handle mentally ill. You know, because mentally ill people can't hurt anyone. So, the headlines, all of them in combination, they're just horrific. They're very biased. Everything that obviously the police's fault has nothing to do with Alfred Olango's actions. None of that. It's all on the cops. So up to now, we've seen some horrific examples of, quote, journalism. Just very incendiary headlines, misleading stuff. So let's take a look at this headline here. This is ABC 10 News. Looks like it's a local station down in the San Diego area. And it looks like they dug into the background of the man who was shot and killed by the El Cajon Police Department, Alfred Olango. So from their article, he immigrated to the United States in 1991 with his family. He has a lengthy criminal history, including multiple felonies with priors for guns and selling cocaine. According to 2010 court records, he has no known history of mental or emotional problems. So, based on that, I'm going to go with he probably wasn't crazy. He was probably high, but that's just a guess on my part. But we know for a fact that at least up until 6 years ago, he had no known history of mental illness or emotional instability. So this whole he was mentally ill part of this is based on one thing, which is just the sister's comment. And who knows if it's accurate or not. So, all right, let's take a look at some shooting stances here. First up, here's a illustration showing an isosceles shooting stance. You can see he's got both arms extended straight forward, holding the gun, pointed at whatever it is that he's going to be shooting at his target. So, for those of you not familiar with shooting stances, this is a drawing of an isosceles shooting stance. All right, so here we have a man in a isosceles shooting stance. You can see both overhead and a frontal photo of what it looks like. Here's a woman in an isosceles shooting stance, camera off to the side a little bit. Here is another man in an isosceles. Actually, this is almost more of a weaver. His right foot's dropped back a little bit, but his shoulders are squared up, his arms are straight out, gun pointing at his target. Here is another woman this is more of a weaver stance as well. Her right foot dropped back. That would be her strong side foot dropped back. Both arms extended, shoulder height, gun in front of her, pointed at her target. And then here's another gentleman in a shooting stance. Oh, wait a minute. That is Alfred Olango in a isosceles or weaver shooting stance. Both arms up together with something in his hands pointed at his target. His target, just at the edge of that photo there, is the officer that he was pointing the vape at, and that would be the officer who shot him. Here is another photo of Alfred Olango. That other one that was a close-up, I pulled directly from this. This is the photo that was released to the media. This is from a cell phone video of the actual shooting. You can see both officers here. They're triangulating on Olango, which is normal officer behavior. And you can see Olango standing there and clearly pointing something at the officers in a shooting stance. I just showed you multiple examples of a shooting stance, and that is exactly what Olango is doing here. Folks, this is what we call suicide by cop. He did something. He knew what he was doing. He did something to get the cops to shoot him. And moving on to the whole mentally ill aspect. You noticed several of those news stories there were talking about how he was supposedly mentally ill. Like that's supposed to mean that he can't be armed or can't be dangerous. Here are a number of photos of mentally or emotionally unstable people who manage to get their hands on guns and kill lots of people. The mainstream media, the anti-gun media, is very fond of pointing this out every time something bad happens. But as soon as it's not a bad guy killing innocent people, and it's the cops killing a crazy guy, they totally forget that crazy people can actually kill you. Okay? Him being mentally ill, whether he was or not, is totally irrelevant to how the cops act until they have him detained. You can't just let some crazy guy running around who may or may not have a gun with his hands in his pockets. You've got, once they detain him, that's when they start worrying about whether he's mentally ill or not. Okay? You can't just, oh, the person who called us says he's crazy, so let's go in with kid gloves on and be really nice to this guy. That's not how it works. Once he's detained, then you start worrying about whether he's mentally ill, or he's a criminal, or he's high, or whatever the issue is. But until that happens, you have to treat him as if he is armed. Because plenty of times, crazy people have been armed and have shot and killed people. And lastly, we're going to talk about why I say this is the media ginning everybody up on this race issue. Okay? This shooting was on Tuesday the 27th. The shooting of Alfred Olango was on Tuesday the 27th. They made a huge deal about this unarmed crazy black guy pointing something at the cops, and the cops shot and killed him. On Friday the 23rd, in Fair Oaks, California, officers were in exactly the same situation. They got calls because a guy was acting crazy, breaking into houses, trying to break into houses, running around. The officers get there. He's not complying. He has his hands in his pockets, and all of a sudden he brings his hands up and points something at the officers, and the officers shoot and kill him. It wasn't a gun. I have no idea what it was. It says it was doesn't describe what the object was. However, you'll also notice that there's no race listed in this news report. It's because he was a white guy. Okay, the media doesn't care about the incidents. They only care about the race of the person. It's obvious. Blue Lives Matter, on their website the other day, they had an article, and it talked about on the same day that Keith Scott was killed by cops, there were a total of 6 people killed that day by officers across the United States. You didn't hear about the other 5 because they were all white. The only one you heard about, the only one that became an issue, was Keith Scott, and that's because he's black, and it goes into this whole the cops are racists and they're keeping the black people down narrative that the media is constantly pushing, that black lives matter. Notice I say lies, not lives, because nothing that they're basing this on has ever been shown to be the truth. Everything they say has been disproven, every single incident. So, anyway.
All right, so just to try and wrap this up a little bit, the media, they're pulling your strings. They're getting you to do what they want. The reason they're doing it, I couldn't tell you other than, one, I know it makes them money. Every click on their website gets them money. Everybody who tunes into their station makes them money. So I'm not sure if they're selling the entire country down the drain just to make money or what their problem is. But so take everything that they say with a grain of salt. Please realize that cops aren't out there just hunting down random black people and killing them. Cops aren't out there just randomly hunting down unarmed people and killing them. Okay? We take lots of things into account. Suspects' actions. Okay? If you go like that with something that looks like a gun or something that is a gun, you can expect to get shot. If the cops are telling you to get your hands in the air, the cops are telling you to drop the gun, the cops are telling you to drop whatever it is you have in your hand, the cops are telling you to take your hands out of your pockets, do it slowly and get your hands in the air. There are simple ways to avoid getting killed by the cops. Doing that with something that's round, cylindrical, looks like a gun, not one of those ways to avoid getting shot and killed by the cops. Doing that with an actual gun, not one of those ways to avoid getting shot and killed by the cops. It's not that difficult. People have encounters with the cops millions of times a year and don't get shot and killed.